Tonight, we travel back to a lonely stretch of highway in the autumn of 1961, where a quiet drive beneath the stars became something far stranger than either Betty or Barney Hill could explain. Two ordinary people, a clear night, and a presence that watched from the sky. Welcome to Urban Lullabies, where true stories slip gently into nightmare. In this chilling journey, we follow Barney Hill, a man of reason, of steady hands and skeptical eyes, as he and his wife Betty cross into something that lives between memory and myth. What began as a quiet road trip home from Canada would unravel into one of the most chilling, most studied alien abduction cases in American history. But this is not a tale of flashing lights and little green men. No, this is something slower, colder, something that seeps under your skin and makes you question not just what you see, but what you forget. So close your eyes, let the hum of the highway carry you, and listen closely, for what they took was more than time. Barney and Betty Hill were an ordinary couple living in the small town of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in the early 1960s. Married for nearly a decade, their relationship was one of companionship and mutual respect. Barney, a postal worker with a keen interest in astronomy, was known for his curiosity and down-to-earth demeanor. Betty, a school cafeteria worker, was gentle and nurturing, deeply devoted to her family and community. Together, they embodied the image of a typical American couple navigating the post-war era. Though leading simple lives, Barney and Betty shared a fascination with the unknown. Barney often spent nights gazing at the stars, dreaming of what might exist beyond the limits of Earth. Betty, while less outspoken about such ideas, trusted her husband's instincts and supported his interest in space and unexplained phenomena. They were grounded in their community, but quietly entertained thoughts of the mysteries that might lurk in the vast skies above. On a September evening in 1961, the Hills were about to embark on a journey that would forever change their lives and leave an indelible mark on the history of UFO encounters. What began as a routine drive back from a vacation in Canada would soon spiral into a baffling and terrifying experience, one that neither of them could have anticipated. Their trip started normally enough. The couple had spent a restful week visiting friends and sightseeing in Montreal. On the night of September 19th, Barney and Betty set out to return to their home in Portsmouth, traveling along the winding rural roads of New Hampshire's White Mountains. The air was cool, the sky clear and speckled with stars, perfect for Barney's eager gaze upward. As they drove along the isolated roads, the silence of the night was interrupted only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the low hum of the car engine. Yet, despite the tranquility, an unshakable sense of unease began to settle in the back of their minds. Betty later recalled a feeling of being watched, as if invisible eyes tracked their every move. Barney, ever the rational thinker, dismissed the sensation, but felt a strange pull in his chest, a warning he couldn't explain. Neither knew that their lives were about to intersect with something utterly beyond human understanding, an encounter that would challenge their beliefs, test their sanity, and ignite a worldwide fascination with alien abduction that continues to this day. The night of September 19th, 1961, was calm and clear as Barney and Betty Hill settled into their 1957 silver-gray Chevrolet sedan. Their vacation in Montreal had been a welcome escape from everyday life, a time to relax and reconnect. Now, under a star-filled sky, they were driving back home through the winding roads of New Hampshire's White Mountains, surrounded by dense forests and the quiet hum of the countryside. As they drove, Barney kept glancing up at the sky, fascinated by the glittering stars that stretched endlessly above them. He was an amateur astronomer, often spending evenings identifying constellations and planets. Betty, sitting beside him, was more focused on the road, but occasionally looked out into the darkness, comforted by Barney's presence. The road was narrow and mostly deserted. The radio played softly, and the car's headlights cut through the blackness ahead. Around 10:30 p.m., they passed a small clearing, and suddenly noticed something unusual, a bright light hovering silently in the sky. Barney slowed the car, squinting to get a better look. The light was unlike anything they had seen before. It pulsed softly, shifting colors from white to orange, then to a bluish hue. Betty felt a sudden chill despite the warm night air. "Barney," she whispered, "do you see that? What is it?" Barney's curiosity was piqued, but he tried to keep calm. "I don't know, but it's not a plane or a helicopter. Look how steady it is, almost like it's watching us." The light began to move slowly, maintaining its distance, but following their car. As they continued down the road, Barney's unease grew as he realized it was not just a distant light, but something deliberately tracking them. He instinctively reached for his binoculars, but hesitated, unsure of what he might find. Betty gripped the dashboard nervously. "Maybe it's a weather balloon or some kind of satellite," she suggested, trying to rationalize the strange object. Before Barney could respond, the light suddenly surged forward, illuminating the surrounding trees with a harsh glow. The car's radio crackled, and then went silent, leaving only the sounds of the night and their pounding hearts. Barney slammed on the brakes. "We should stop and watch," he said. "Maybe it's a scientific experiment or military testing." Betty was frightened, but nodded, trusting Barney's judgment. They pulled over to the side of the road, turning off the engine. The forest around them was eerily quiet. The light hovered just above the treetops now, casting long shadows and making the night seem surreal. Suddenly, Barney felt a powerful, almost magnetic pull in the air. The hairs on his arms stood on end. Betty squeezed his hand tightly, her eyes wide with fear. Neither spoke as they stared into the glowing orb that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Minutes felt like hours as they remained frozen, caught between disbelief and terror. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the light zipped upward at an incredible speed and disappeared into the vast night sky. Shaken but determined to reach home, Barney restarted the engine, and they continued driving. Yet, deep down, both sensed this night would be remembered, not as a simple road trip, but as the beginning of an experience that defied explanation. After the mysterious light vanished into the night sky, Barney and Betty resumed their drive, but the eerie atmosphere lingered between them, like a heavy fog. The silence in the car was thick. Neither spoke, both lost in their own thoughts, trying to rationalize what they had just witnessed. Barney kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting the strange light to reappear. The winding road ahead seemed endless, lined with towering trees that cast long shadows under the moonlight. Betty's hands gripped the door handle tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, up ahead, Barney noticed something unusual. "Look, Betty," he whispered, pointing toward a faint glow in the distance just beyond the tree line. "There's something there." The glow was unlike the first light. This one was more defined, a shape with a definite outline that seemed to hover just above the ground. Barney slowed the car to a crawl, squinting to make out what it was. As they got closer, the object became clearer. A large, oval-shaped craft, metallic and smooth, resting silently among the trees. It emitted a soft humming sound that vibrated through the air, low but persistent. The craft's surface glowed with shifting colors, silver, then blue, then a strange iridescent green. Betty's breath caught in her throat. "Barney, what is that?" Before he could answer, the car's engine sputtered and died. The headlights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. The only illumination came from the glowing craft nearby. Barney tried the ignition again, but the engine refused to start. The radio remained dead, and the dashboard lights faded to black. A wave of panic washed over him. "Stay calm, Betty. We're just having car trouble. I'll get us out of here." Betty nodded, though her eyes were wide with terror. She reached for Barney's hand, holding on tightly. The silence between them was broken only by the soft humming from the craft and the distant rustling of leaves. Suddenly, the craft's lights brightened, and a beam of white light shot out, bathing the car in an unearthly glow. Barney felt an intense heat on his skin. Despite the cool night air, his muscles tensed as an overwhelming sense of paralysis crept over him. Betty's voice was barely audible, trembling with fear. "Barney, I can't move." Barney struggled against the invisible force that held him captive. The world around them seemed to warp and blur as the beam lifted them slightly out of their seats. Their surroundings vanished, replaced by a strange silence that pressed heavily on their minds. The minutes stretched into an eternity as they floated helplessly inside the beam, unable to see what awaited them. Their thoughts raced, fear mingled with disbelief. What was happening to them? Were they about to disappear into the unknown? Then, as abruptly as it began, the beam retracted. The couple found themselves gently set back into their seats, the car's engine roaring back to life. The glowing craft vanished silently into the night sky, leaving Barney and Betty alone on the dark road. Breathless and shaken, they exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. Something had happened, something extraordinary and terrifying. Neither could deny it. Their lives were forever changed. Barney's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the steering wheel, his heart pounding in his chest. The car's engine had restarted, but the strange encounter left an unshakable feeling of dread between him and Betty. The quiet hum of the night was now replaced by a heavy silence filled with unspoken questions and fear. As they continued down the dark, winding road, Barney kept glancing nervously at the rearview mirror, half expecting the glowing craft to return. Betty sat rigid, her eyes wide and searching the shadows beyond the trees. Suddenly, the silence shattered as a bright light appeared ahead, more intense and closer than before. The craft, now unmistakably real, hovered just above the treetops, casting eerie shadows across the road. Barney slowed to a stop, his breath visible in the chilly night air. The object was massive, round, metallic, with a smooth reflective surface that seemed to pulse softly with an otherworldly light. It made no sound, yet Barney felt a deep vibration in his chest, like the steady beat of a distant drum. Betty clutched Barney's arm tightly. "Barney, what is it? What do they want?" Barney shook his head, unable to answer. His rational mind wrestled with disbelief, but his senses screamed that this was no ordinary machine. As they sat frozen, a beam of white light shot down from the craft, enveloping their car in a cold glow. The engine died again, and the world seemed to tilt. Time slowed as the beam lifted them gently out of their seats, a force beyond gravity pulling them upward. Inside the craft's light, Barney's eyes adjusted to an eerie illumination. He caught glimpses of strange shapes moving beyond the misty glow, figures, humanoid but alien, with large dark eyes and slender bodies. Their movements were deliberate and calm, but an instinctual fear gripped Barney's heart. Betty squeezed his hand, whispering, "We have to stay calm. Maybe they're trying to communicate." The beam drew them up through a circular hatch that silently opened in the craft's underside. The sound was muffled, replaced by a strange, sterile atmosphere. The couple's bodies felt weightless as they entered a room bathed in pale white light. Barney's eyes darted around, taking in the bizarre environment. Strange consoles blinked softly with unknown symbols. The air smelled faintly metallic and cold. Several small beings approached, no taller than 4 feet, with oversized heads and almond-shaped eyes that reflected the light like black mirrors. Betty felt a wave of nausea, but forced herself to remain composed. Barney tried to speak, but found his voice caught in his throat. The beings gestured calmly, their expressions unreadable. Suddenly, a soft buzzing filled the room as one of the aliens raised a slender instrument toward Barney. The sensation was strange, but not painful, a cold prickling against his skin. Betty watched helplessly as the creatures conducted some sort of examination, their intentions unknown. Time lost meaning inside the craft. Minutes, hours, Barney couldn't tell. The encounter was clinical, precise, and utterly alien. Then, as quickly as it had begun, they were released. The hatch slid shut. The beam lowered them gently back into their car. The engine roared to life, and the craft vanished into the star-speckled sky. Breathless and shaken, Barney and Betty exchanged glances filled with disbelief and fear. Their experience was no hallucination. It was something real and terrifying, a close encounter that defied explanation. The moments after the strange craft vanished into the night sky were filled with a heavy silence that seemed to press against Barney and Betty's very souls. The couple sat in their car, breathless, hands trembling, trying to grasp the reality of what had just happened. Barney's fingers fumbled with the ignition, and with a sputter, the engine roared back to life. The night air, once crisp and clear, now felt thick and suffocating. As they began driving again, a strange sense of disorientation crept over them. The trees lining the road seemed unfamiliar, the road itself winding in ways they couldn't quite place. Betty's fingers gripped the edge of the seat as she whispered, "Barney, did we just lose time?" Barney's jaw clenched as he tried to steady his nerves. "I don't know. It feels like something's missing." His eyes scanned the road, searching for any sign that would anchor them back to reality. Later, when they finally reached home, a profound exhaustion settled over both of them. They could barely speak of what happened, their minds clouded with confusion and fear. That night, Betty was plagued by vivid nightmares, images of strange beings with large black eyes and cold metallic rooms filled with blinking lights. She awoke in cold sweats, her heart pounding. Barney, too, found himself troubled by lingering physical effects. A strange rash appeared on his neck, and he felt inexplicably weak, as if some invisible force had drained his vitality. Despite his usually pragmatic nature, Barney began to question everything he thought he knew about the world. In the days that followed, the couple's memories remained fragmented and puzzling. They had a sense that something had happened to them, something profound and frightening, but the details eluded them. The feeling of lost time gnawed at their minds, haunting their waking hours. Determined to understand their experience, Barney and Betty tried to piece together the missing moments. Yet, every attempt only deepened the mystery. Friends and family noticed the change in the couple. Barney's usually steady demeanor was shaken, and Betty's gentle smile had grown distant. Their story was not just about a strange light or a bizarre craft. It was about something far more unsettling, an experience that seemed to breach the boundaries of reality itself. The Hills were now trapped in a liminal space between the known and the unknown, forced to confront the possibility that their encounter was real, and that it had left an indelible mark on their lives. As the weeks passed, Betty's nightmares grew more intense, and Barney's physical symptoms worsened. They both began to wonder if the answers they sought lay buried deep within their own minds, memories repressed or hidden by fear. Little did they know, the road to uncovering the truth would lead them to the world of hypnosis, media scrutiny, and a place in history that would forever change the way humanity thought about alien encounters. In the weeks following their strange and terrifying experience, Barney and Betty Hill found themselves struggling with more than just the memories or lack thereof of that fateful night. Their bodies and minds seemed to be betraying them, as symptoms both physical and psychological began to surface, signaling that the encounter had left deeper scars than either of them initially realized. Betty, once warm and cheerful, became withdrawn and restless. She was haunted by vivid, unsettling nightmares that replayed fragments of the night. Shadowy figures, piercing black eyes, and cold clinical rooms filled with strange instruments. Each morning, she woke drenched in sweat, her heart racing as if she had just escaped some unimaginable horror. The trauma seeped into her waking hours, making everyday life feel surreal and fragile. Barney, ever the rational thinker, struggled to maintain his composure, but even he could not ignore the strange rash that had appeared on his neck, a reddish, inflamed mark that seemed to pulse beneath the skin. He also experienced bouts of weakness and headaches that no doctor could explain. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized the tired man staring back. Their relationship, once a solid foundation of trust and support, was tested under the weight of these unexplained changes. They tried to talk openly, but often found themselves at a loss for words, unable to fully convey the fear and confusion swelling inside them. Friends and neighbors noticed the change, offering concerned glances but no answers. As news of their experience began to spread, at first through whispered conversations and then through more public channels, the Hills found themselves at the center of a storm. Some dismissed their story outright, labeling it as fantasy or a hoax. Others were curious, even sympathetic, drawn in by the mystery that seemed to defy explanation. Despite the mixed reactions, Barney and Betty felt isolated. They were living with a secret, too strange to share fully, yet too important to keep hidden. They wondered if they were losing their grip on reality, or if the world around them was simply not ready to hear what they had to say. Determined to uncover the truth, the Hills sought help beyond their small town. They consulted doctors and psychologists, searching for explanations that might account for their physical symptoms and fragmented memories. But answers were elusive, and the deeper they dug, the more questions arose. Eventually, they were introduced to Dr. Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist with experience in hypnosis. With cautious hope, Barney and Betty agreed to undergo hypnotic regression, a controversial technique aimed at uncovering repressed memories buried beneath the surface of conscious thought. The decision to enter hypnosis was not made lightly. For the Hills, it was a last resort, a desperate attempt to reclaim the missing pieces of their story and make sense of the nightmare that had overtaken their lives. What they would discover in those sessions would both shock and astonish them, confirming that their experience was far more extraordinary and unsettling than anyone had imagined. As the weeks turned into months after their harrowing encounter, Barney and Betty Hill realized that their fragmented memories and unsettling symptoms were something neither they nor their community could resolve on their own. The experience had shaken them deeply, and the growing divide between what they remembered and what their intuition told them only increased their anxiety. Friends and family, though concerned, struggled to understand the depth of their distress. Some whispered doubts, others offered comfort, but the Hills felt increasingly isolated. The local townspeople found the story strange and unbelievable, and soon the couple's tale began to attract attention beyond their small New Hampshire community. Seeking answers, Barney and Betty reached out to professionals who might shed light on their ordeal. Doctors were consulted to investigate Barney's mysterious rash and the physical weakness both were experiencing, but medical tests revealed no clear cause. Psychologists offered some explanations: stress, trauma, perhaps even hallucination, but none could fully account for the vivid nightmares and the strange, persistent gaps in their memories. Eventually, through a friend's recommendation, the Hills met Dr. Benjamin Simon, a respected psychiatrist based in Boston. Simon specialized in using hypnosis to access repressed or forgotten memories, a controversial but increasingly accepted technique in the field of psychology. With cautious hope, the Hills agreed to undergo hypnotic regression, willing to explore whatever truths might lie buried deep within their minds. Their first sessions with Dr. Simon were delicate. Both Barney and Betty were nervous, unsure of what to expect or whether the process might bring relief or deepen their fear. Under hypnosis, their conscious minds faded into a quiet, receptive state, allowing memories and sensations long hidden to resurface. Slowly, fragmented images began to emerge. Betty described a room filled with strange lights and beings with large, dark eyes, while Barney recalled feeling lifted and examined by unfamiliar hands. These recollections were vivid and detailed, yet tinged with confusion and fear. The hypnotic sessions unlocked pieces of their missing time, revealing an experience unlike anything previously documented. Both Barney and Betty recounted being taken aboard a craft, subjected to medical examinations, and communicating, though not with words, with beings that defied human understanding. Despite the revelations, doubts lingered. Could these memories be true, or were they fabrications of the subconscious mind, influenced by fear and suggestion? The Hills grappled with these questions as their story began to draw public and media attention, setting them on a path that would challenge not only their beliefs, but the beliefs of an entire generation. Dr. Benjamin Simon's office in Boston was quiet and clinical, far removed from the chaos that had begun to surround the Hills' lives. Inside, the lights were low, the air still. Dr. Simon, calm and methodical, had no interest in alien theories or sensationalism. His goal was simple: to treat the emotional distress he saw in Barney and Betty. What he found, however, would become one of the most detailed and chilling accounts of alien abduction ever recorded. The hypnosis sessions were conducted separately. Dr. Simon wanted to prevent cross-contamination between their stories. If their accounts were truly fabricated, they would likely diverge under pressure. But from the very first sessions, something strange became clear. Their recollections, though told in different rooms at different times, aligned with uncanny precision. Under deep hypnosis, Barney recalled feelings of paralyzing fear. He described a moment when he stepped out of the car with his binoculars to observe the strange craft more closely. He remembered the silent movement of the object as it descended behind a line of trees, and the sudden realization that he was being watched. He recounted seeing figures looking at him through windows on the craft, tall, pale beings with large wraparound eyes that seemed to peer directly into his thoughts. "They're not human," he whispered during one session, his voice cracking. "They're watching me, like I'm an animal. I don't want them to come closer." Barney's memory reached a terrifying crescendo when he described being led onto the craft by these figures. He didn't remember walking, just floating, helpless, guided by unseen forces. He was separated from Betty, taken into a sterile room, and subjected to a series of examinations. A circular instrument was placed over his genitals, a device he believed was used to collect a sample, one being stared into his eyes, deeply, deliberately, as if probing his very mind. Betty's sessions mirrored many of Barney's details. She remembered being taken aboard the craft and placed on a table under a bright light. The beings communicated not with words, but with a kind of thought projection. Though they were emotionless, she did not feel they intended harm. Still, the examination was deeply invasive. Betty recalled long needles, a cranial scan, and a strange test involving a piece of her skin. She also described a conversation with a being she called the leader. In her hypnotic state, she asked him where they were from. He showed her a star map, dots and lines, in a pattern she didn't recognize. When she asked where Earth was on the map, he responded cryptically, saying she wouldn't understand. Years later, this detail would become one of the most hotly debated parts of her account. As the sessions progressed, Dr. Simon was stunned. Both patients showed intense emotional reactions, physical stress responses, and deep psychological consistency. Whether they had truly been abducted or had constructed a shared delusion, he couldn't say. But he was convinced of one thing: they believed it. What began as a search for mental peace had instead opened a door into something vast, inexplicable, and deeply unsettling. The Hills were no longer just witnesses. They were survivors of an experience that defied human understanding. The hypnosis sessions continued for months, each one peeling back the layers of Barney and Betty's forgotten night, like skin from an onion, slow, careful, and painful. What emerged was a remarkably detailed sequence of events that painted a chilling and surreal portrait of alien contact. Betty's sessions revealed the clearest images of the craft's interior. She described the room she was taken to as sterile and bright, its walls curved and seamless, like it had been molded from a single piece of some unknown material. A metal examination table sat in the center, surrounded by small gliding beings who moved without sound, their long fingers deft and cold. Betty was asked to lie on the table. Her clothes were removed, and the beings communicated through thoughts, a kind of emotional projection she couldn't fully explain. They seemed curious, not malicious, clinical in the way scientists handle a specimen, but there was no comfort in their detachment. She described a long needle inserted into her navel, a test, she was told, for pregnancy. The pain was sharp and immediate. She screamed in her hypnotic state, and Dr. Simon noted her body reacting violently to the memory. One of the beings waved its hand in front of her face, and the pain disappeared instantly, replaced by a warm, floating calm. Barney's accounts were darker, more fragmented, laced with raw terror. He remembered being led down a hallway, flanked by two smaller beings who guided him without touch. He found himself in a room with a single, featureless chair. He was made to sit, and strange instruments were placed on his head and chest. He couldn't move or speak. A device like a lens was brought close to his eyes. Barney recalled a burning sensation as if something was probing into his mind. "They're pulling thoughts out of me," he cried during one session. "They're going into my head. I can't stop them." Both recalled the beings examining their limbs, skin, and even collecting samples of hair and nail clippings. There was a cold efficiency in every movement. No malice, no cruelty, just the unsettling indifference of something that didn't think in human terms. Then came the moment Betty remembered as the conversation. One of the beings, taller than the rest, allowed her to ask questions. She asked where they came from. The being led her to what she described as a star map on the wall, a three-dimensional display with dozens of small glowing points connected by lines. She was told the lines indicated trade and exploration routes. Betty asked where Earth was. The being responded, "If you don't know where you are, it wouldn't help to show you where we are." The moment was surreal, an alien explaining navigation like a teacher gently correcting a child. After the examinations, the couple was returned to their car in the same beam of light that had lifted them. Their watches had stopped. Their memories would not return for years, but from that point forward, they were never the same. The hypnosis sessions concluded with Dr. Simon reluctantly acknowledging what he had witnessed. He couldn't prove that the events truly occurred, but the consistency, emotion, and depth of the Hills' testimony were undeniable. These weren't delusions, they were trauma. For Barney and Betty, the memories offered clarity, but no peace. The experience they'd unearthed was too vast, too strange, to fit neatly into any known frame of reality. And once the sessions ended, their story, so carefully guarded until now, was about to become a global phenomenon. Word of Barney and Betty Hill's experience might have remained quietly buried in hypnosis transcripts and therapy notes had it not been for the curiosity of a local journalist. In 1965, 4 years after the abduction, a newspaper article broke the story wide open. Couple recounts alien encounter under hypnosis. Suddenly, the private nightmare the Hills had endured became a national conversation. The article summarized the Hills' ordeal in broad strokes, focusing on the mysterious lights, the missing time, and the detailed memories recovered under hypnosis. Though their names weren't printed initially, it wasn't long before the media discovered their identities. From that point forward, Betty and Barney Hill became reluctant public figures, symbols of something extraordinary, and to some unbelievable. The response was immediate and intense. Some readers were fascinated. For many, this was the first alien abduction account they'd ever heard. It was terrifying and strangely plausible, backed by credible people, a middle-class interracial couple with no prior history of attention-seeking, examined by a respected psychiatrist who never once pushed a UFO narrative. Their sincerity lent weight to the incredible story. Others, however, were skeptical, if not hostile. Critics accused the Hills of fabricating the story for attention or misinterpreting dreams as memories. Skeptics pointed out that Betty had previously read about UFOs and might have incorporated those ideas into her hypnotic memories. They questioned the influence of suggestion during hypnosis and the reliability of memory under altered states of consciousness. But the story wouldn't go away. In 1966, author John G. Fuller published The Interrupted Journey, a detailed account of the Hills' experience based on Dr. Simon's hypnosis sessions and personal interviews. The book was a sensation. It brought the Hills' story to a global audience and was soon followed by a made-for-TV movie in 1975, starring James Earl Jones as Barney, a powerful and emotional portrayal that brought even more attention to the case. The media spotlight brought its own challenges. Barney, a private and reserved man, found the attention deeply uncomfortable. He felt exposed, vulnerable. Betty, more curious and open to discussing the phenomenon, embraced the opportunity to explore what had happened to them. But the strain on their marriage was evident. They had lived through something otherworldly, and now they had to navigate the very human consequences of disbelief, ridicule, and unwanted fame. Yet the impact of their story was undeniable. UFO researchers seized on it as a watershed moment, the first alien abduction case in American history to gain mainstream attention. The details from their hypnosis sessions, especially the medical examinations and the star map, became templates for hundreds of abduction stories that followed in the decades to come. Despite the scrutiny, the Hills never wavered in their version of events. They didn't try to capitalize on their experience. They never sold merchandise or claimed to be prophets. They simply told their truth over and over again, and let the world make of it what it would. The world was listening, whether it believed or not. As the story of Barney and Betty Hill spread, so too did the scrutiny. Scientists, psychologists, skeptics, and journalists all weighed in, some curious, others dismissive, and many determined to explain what had happened without invoking extraterrestrials. At the center of it all stood Dr. Benjamin Simon, the psychiatrist who had conducted the Hills' hypnosis sessions. Though he had no personal investment in UFOs or aliens, Dr. Simon was careful and precise in how he framed the case. In his view, the Hills had experienced something traumatic, possibly a real event, or perhaps a shared delusion triggered by extreme stress. He emphasized that while the sessions revealed intense and consistent memories, hypnosis was not a magic window into truth. Memories recovered under hypnosis could be influenced by suggestion, fantasy, or deeply buried fears. Dr. Simon's conclusion was conservative, but respectful. The Hills believed what they said. That belief and the emotional distress tied to it were real. Psychologists who reviewed the case proposed various theories. Some suggested that the stress of being an interracial couple in early 1960s America, when such relationships were still stigmatized, may have contributed to heightened anxiety or feelings of persecution, which then manifested in a shared psychological episode. Others pointed to Betty's dreams, recorded shortly after the encounter but before the hypnosis, as possible sources for the narrative she later recounted under trance. Her subconscious, they argued, may have constructed a story to explain the missing time. Barney's version, too, raised questions. A reserved man, less interested in UFOs than his wife, he was nonetheless the one who reacted most violently under hypnosis, screaming, sweating, convulsing in fear. Some theorized this emotional response indicated suppressed trauma, possibly unrelated to aliens. Others argued it only added to the story's credibility. Why would someone willingly relive something so horrifying unless he genuinely believed it? Then came the physical evidence. What little there was. The Hills' watches had stopped working after the encounter. Betty's dress had strange pink stains and tears along the zipper and hem, and Barney's shoes were scuffed oddly at the tips, as if he had been dragged. These details weren't definitive proof, but they resisted easy explanation. And then there was the star map, Betty described under hypnosis, later drawn from memory. In the 1960s, amateur astronomer Marjorie Fish attempted to match it to real star systems, claiming it aligned with Zeta Reticuli, a binary star system unknown to most at the time. This added fuel to the theory that Betty had seen something she couldn't have fabricated. Despite all these competing theories, no single explanation fully dismantled the Hills' account. To some, that ambiguity was a sign the story was too convenient to be true. To others, it was precisely what made it believable. Real life, especially when confronting the unknown, is rarely tidy. Barney and Betty never changed their story. They didn't seek fame, nor did they retreat from the public eye completely. They simply stood by what they remembered. Whether those memories were buried truths or a shared illusion, only they could truly say. Their sincerity, more than anything, kept the mystery alive. Barney Hill passed away in 1969, just 8 years after the night that changed everything. He was only 46 years old. Doctors said it was a cerebral hemorrhage, but Betty believed the stress from the abduction and the public attention had taken a toll on his health. He had never fully recovered from that night, not emotionally, not physically. His quiet dignity remained intact until the end, but those who knew him best saw the cracks beneath his calm surface. Betty lived for many more years, becoming a quiet but persistent voice in the growing UFO community. She gave lectures, answered letters from people around the world, and shared her story whenever asked, not to convince others, but because to her it had happened. She never claimed to have all the answers. She wasn't interested in fame. She was simply a woman who had seen something impossible and spent the rest of her life trying to live with the truth of it. Over time, the Hills' story came to define the alien abduction narrative. Their experience introduced key elements that would become staples of future accounts: lost time, telepathic communication, strange medical examinations, and beings with oversized heads and dark, almond-shaped eyes. Whether real or imagined, their testimony shaped the framework of how we as a culture imagine extraterrestrial contact. To UFO researchers, the Hills case remains one of the most credible and compelling. It's not just the hypnosis sessions or the physical evidence that give it weight, it's who they were. They had no motive to lie. They didn't seek profit. They weren't interested in rewriting history. And when subjected to scrutiny, their stories held firm. To skeptics, the Hills experience is a fascinating case study in the power of belief and memory. It raises questions about how trauma manifests, how the mind processes the unknown, and how cultural context can shape our deepest fears. But to most, the story is something else entirely, a haunting mystery that still resists explanation. The stretch of highway where the Hills had their encounter, US Route 3, near Lincoln, New Hampshire, is now marked with a small plaque. It reads simply, "On the night of September 19, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill experienced a close encounter with a UFO. No answers, just a quiet acknowledgement that something happened here." Betty passed away in 2004 at the age of 85. Until her final days, she insisted that what she and Barney experienced was real, that they were taken, that they were changed. The legacy they left behind is not just a story of lights in the sky or strange dreams under hypnosis. It's the story of two ordinary people caught in something extraordinary, something vast and unknowable that continues to spark questions more than 6 decades later. And maybe that's the real gift they left us. Not certainty, but curiosity. Not fear, but wonder. A reminder that the universe is wide, and we are not the only ones who may be looking into the dark. You've been listening to the true story of Betty and Barney Hill, the couple whose encounter with the unknown reshaped how we think about what might lie beyond our stars and within our minds. Some say it was a shared hallucination, a dream, a trauma given form. Others believe it was something more, something real. But one truth remains: they were never the same. Thank you for dreaming with Urban Lullabies. If their story lingered in your thoughts, let us know. Leave a comment, subscribe, or share this episode with someone who's looked up at the sky and felt like something was looking back. Until next time, sleep lightly.